So welcome to another episode. So today we have Harry Brightmore on, who is an Olympic champion for the rubbing team. So welcome to today's episode, Harry.
Thanks very much for having me. Yeah, it's exciting to be here.
Well, I was just saying two things off air, just so it's not missed. One is that you look remarkably like Jamie Vardy. And the second was that I hadn't really heard of who you were until I saw this video online. And I was literally lying down in my bed and I just felt like jumping up and doing press ups, going rowing, going for a run. It was kind of a surreal experience, if I'm honest. And it kind of lives in my head rent free, that video now.
Yeah, I've seen it crop up on a few accounts on like social media. I released the recording of my Olympic final pretty soon after the Olympics, and I thought it would be a really cool insight into the boat of like what a cox does. So I'm the guy that sits at the rear end of the stern of the boat, and I'm a tactician, a motivator. And like quite often I see comments on these sort of social media posts of like, this is the guy who just like sits along and goes for the ride and all that sort of stuff, and it's God, I could do that job. And I thought after the Olympics, it'd be quite cool for people to actually just see what it is that I do and hear what it's like to actually be sat in a boat for an Olympic final. And yeah, it spread around pretty quick.
Mate, it's crazy. I saw it on like 3 or 4 accounts and I was like, oh man. So I actually screenshotted it. So I went through an injury myself, a knee injury through judo.
Yeah.
And I was off for quite a while, like an MCL and ACL sprain. Not quite a tear, which is good because that would have been, a few years out, especially as a non-Olympic athlete or non-high level athlete. You don't get the same level of support, through NHS and stuff. So it's a lot longer recovery rather than being in surgery the next day, for example. You're waiting and it takes a long time.
Yeah.
So I was quite glad, but I was listening to that video on repeat while I was like doing my legs because my leg was like jelly leg because obviously the ligaments. And I just playing it. It's like a minute video, which we'll play in a second for those who haven't watched it or seen it. And yeah, I was just like legs, 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 and I was like, it was just getting me through, man. Honest to God.
Yeah. No, it's yeah, I think it's a little bit surreal to hear it back. And it does, watching it back does evoke a lot of memories, but I think it's you sort of you realize like how aggressive the racing situations are in the sport of rowing, and I think it has a sort of a certain perspective from the public of maybe being like quite an elitist sport, but it is really really hard, and these guys are pushing themselves to the absolute physical limit. So much so in fact that like actually two of the guys in the boat were delaying the medal ceremony because they were like in the literal stages of exhaustion. Like they actually couldn't stand up, they couldn't walk. They needed to be seen to by medical professionals afterwards. So it is, it's not for the faint-hearted, that's for sure.
100%. And I actually had a look earlier just out of interest. Like I'd already assumed that it is one of the premier sports in terms of muscular endurance and output. But it was on the top, in the top 10 comfortably. In other ones, it was number 5. In other ones, it was number 1. Because I think with these things, it's never an absolute science to say this is number 1, this is number 2, etc. But the fact that it's there or thereabouts across however many sports, however many disciplines, just shows the level of intensity. Like even for people who don't row, like athletes, professional athletes, or even just normal athletes who are looking to progress, they all do rowing
Mm.
because it's such a good sport in terms of using your arms, your legs, your cardio system, etc. And it's also a competition against yourself. The lactic acid is building up and you're having to push past that boundary of I can't do any more. Actually, yes you can, especially with a man like yourself at the helm of the position. But let's just play that video actually, just so people are aware of what this video is that we're talking about. I just did a practice run earlier to share it and see if it records. It should do, so let's just have a look. It'll probably feel quite weird for you to watch it. Actually, to be fair, it's like listening to your
Yeah,
own voice. It's horrible.
it is. Yeah, it is.
Right, let's have a look. Just let me know if you can see that, buddy. Can you see it?
Yeah, so that is actually that is from Henley Royal Regatta. So that's not necessarily from the Olympics, but yeah,
But
this
mate,
this
the speech on this one is unreal.
yeah.
Mate, incredible. It's saying the right things at the right time. It's like a whole story arc, legs, not long to go, for glory and, all this sort of stuff. And even like shunting, 'cause I have to look at what that is. That's a technical rowing term as well. So you're doing a lot in there.
Yeah, it's quite a complicated job. Those rowing boats are pretty narrow, and they are actually really really wobbly. They're very hard to balance, and so the precision and the timing all adds up to creating a boat that is really nicely set and really powerful, and everything has to be in perfect synchronization. Otherwise, it can fall apart quite quickly. And I mean, you can actually fall in those boats. Like they're really really unstable. And so the position of a cox in an eight-man crew is there to keep eight people perfectly on that same wavelength. And so my job there is to be a coach, a motivator. I do actually steer the boat as well, so I like hold it on a straight course. Um, I think like a really good analogy for like the role that sort of position requires is you're a little bit of like a jockey, like a Formula One driver. It's you're very much like you're somebody who sits in the actual racing component whilst also having to have a serious amount of technical knowledge in order to make it work.
That's interesting as well because I think the thing is with certain niche sports, such as judo, such as rowing, is not everyone has access to it. Like bowling, for example, you can go down your local Hollywood Bowl and see how difficult it is to get strike after strike after
Yeah.
strike, and you can say, oh well, actually, this professional athlete must be really good. Say with snooker, you can go to your local snooker club, try and get a 147 and get a red and a black and feel really good about yourself. And or golf, another one. You could go down the driving range and try and hit 250 yards, and you hit 40 yards, and you're like, oh, this golf pretty hard. But with stuff like rowing, especially with the boat thing, it's not like in the gym where you've just got a row machine and it's sort of linear. What you're saying is this boat is sort of three dimensional. It's moving up and down. You're having to steer it at the back. It's much more of an experience that most people won't really understand how difficult it actually is.
Yeah, it is, and it takes, it does take years to get to that kind of level, and it takes a lot of physical training in order to be able to, well, in order for the body to be able to handle the sorts of well, like you said, that sort of three-dimensional element to it. Rowers need to be able to be, well, incredibly fit because you're going to be doing anywhere between 5 and 8 minutes at an absolute maximum output, like a sprinting output, which is, really, really difficult. It's a sort of anaerobic mixed in with aerobic. It's very, very difficult to produce that kind of top end power for that amount of time. Um, in the same regard, you also need to have an incredibly high uh, strength output. So a lot of weight training goes into that to be able to drive in the boat your feet are attached on a moving seat and you use the oar to actually anchor yourself and produce the power. So you need to be able to produce a hell of a lot of power through your legs and through your hip hinge and in your back. And likewise for, I was alluding earlier to the balance of things, like your core needs to be incredibly strong. Like you need to be able to actually, well, in terms of what you do in the gym, you need to be able to actually like move quite a lot of weight and hold a lot of weight still with your core, so that when you are in a boat that is quite fragile on its balance, the actual athletes that are sat in it are able to use their core connected through their hips to actually hold that boat still.
So on that basis, then, do you think it's? And I know the standard answer is, I suppose, both are equally important. But do you think strength is more important than technique in that sense? Having to have that ability of that level of output in order to, as you say, stabilize yourself using your core, be able to push through that lactic acid state at that high rate for such a long level of time, or do you think that actually you can train the strength and the endurance, but having the technical know-how is probably more difficult and nuanced to understand?
I think I think it's that there's like a scope. It's like the same with many sports. W w Similar to things like cycling. Like it's m most people at some point in their life figure out how to ride a bike. Okay, it's like it's something that a lot of people do. But it takes an athlete to like really get into cycling. With rowing, if you are athletic and you have a proficiency for strength training, fitness training, like you can actually pick up the technique quite easily. It will take a good degree of time to perfect. However, it will lend itself to athletes quite nicely. So generally, yeah, I think you in order to be able to reach the top of the sport of rowing, yeah, you need to have a love for the game, as I'm sure it's as I'm sure it's the case with anything else, really. I think with rowing being a strength endurance sport, it's one that you have to be training for it every day. So to give you an example of how much our team would be training, it would be, we'd have 3 sessions every day, and we'd have maybe a day off or 2 days off every month. Um, And within those 3 sessions, you'd have like an endurance session on the rowing machines, which would be anywhere between 50 minutes and an hour and a half on like static machines. We'd have a session on the water where we're practicing our technique and improving that, or maybe it would be pieces on the water, and then there'd be a weight session as well. And that would be every single day without fail.
Hour and a half on the rower,
Yeah.
plus the other two bits.
Yeah. Yeah,
cheers,
yeah. So like
cheers,
the
mate.
if it was just the hour and a half on the rower and nothing else for the rest of the day, that would be an easy day.
Mate, that's crazy. What are the calorie intake of these athletes then? It must be substantial.
Yeah, you're looking certainly over 4,000, somewhere probably over 6,000 calories a day. Um, like the guys they'd have breakfast before we come in to train at 7:30. We'd get in we'd do a session first thing, probably starting at around 8 o'clock. Then they'd have a second breakfast after that before we get into a second session. And then you're looking at like a really pretty substantial lunch before you get into your third session in the afternoon. And obviously, you're going on then to like dinner and all that sort of stuff. But like the guys were really well drilled in their nutrition, and they'd be getting in protein like immediately after finishing weight sessions and training sessions and stuff like that. So those calories actually like rack up pretty quickly, and they will have had to have got used to like eating as well as training, like in order for your stomach to actually be able to manage taking in the calories required to train that much. It's yeah, it's impressive.
Do they taper off though? Like if they've got a competition or the Olympics coming up or World Championships coming up this week, do they start to reduce their training in order to recover, or do you just basically take them up to the time? Because obviously there is a risk then of potential injury, muscle, tears, or just general fatigue within the muscle.
Yeah, absolutely. I think because of the amount of volume of training that we had to do for our sport, you'd only really taper once in the season, and it would be for your key race that you're going to do. For us, it would be a World Championships that would usually end up in like it would be around September time. Um, and yeah, so we would taper for that, but probably not quite as much for some of the other international races that we do. And we would favor getting in like stronger training for a longer period of time, and maybe not making ourselves like vulnerable, but just like, we'd always be like ever so slightly handicapped for each race that we did, and then we could really turn up for the one that mattered. Um, and likewise, they'd have uh they would understand like how to manage their fuel intake and nutrition stuff in relation to that as well. Like obviously if you're doing maybe like 4 hours, 5 hours of training a day, something like that, you're obviously going to need a lot more fuel, a lot more calorie intake compared to, when we taper off and it's in the 2 weeks before our key competition, that training amount will reduce quite significantly, and the guys will start to feel really, really good, but they obviously don't need like 7,000 calories through that point. So it's, that there's a balance to everything, and we had a really good team behind the team to ensure that that was the case.
But then, well, what about your sort of training as the cox? The brain of the boat, essentially. What does your training entail? Because from what you're saying, or from what we spoke about, and even listening to the sort of motivation on that video, is a lot of it psychological with yourself as much as it is, making sure you're in good physical shape as well.
So for me, so for coxes, there's a minimum weight of 55 kilograms, which is around, it's like just under 9 stone. So that's where the correlation with like being a kind of a jockey comes into play. So there's obviously a weight involved to that. So I would actually do a lot of running training, so as to sort of monitor my own weight, and that came with its challenges. And I would try and do like if the guys were on land doing a session on the rower or on the weights, like I'd be running and trying to almost mirror their like peaks and troughs like through a week with my own running training. And that would sort of help me, first of all, empathize with what they're going through. And especially as somebody who's supposed to be a leader and taking responsibility for these guys, like it's really important that I actually know what it feels like to be doing exactly what they're doing. So that was a really good opportunity for me to understand that. Um, but then also, I think it also helps the other way around. Like it helps them see that I'm also putting in the work, even though I'm not necessarily the one that on race day is there like pulling on an oar. So it's I think like the training that I did was more for not necessarily for like me to be as fit, even though I actually I did get really, really fit. I think it was more of a it was more of an opportunity for the guys to see that actually like I'm just as committed as they are and training just as hard as they are. But when it comes to race day, it's about me knowing what it feels like for them and knowing what they're going to need in that particular moment to pull them through.
So it's very much sort of setting the standard, being the leader rather than the manager. They say the manager sort of do as I say, not as I do. Whereas what you're saying is to be a leader, you have to show that you're willing to go into the deep waters, no pun intended, that they're going to be going through in a week, 4 weeks, 6 weeks time, and gearing up for those bigger competitions, whether it's the Olympics, World Championships. And yeah, I think that's a really important point, though, is to understand someone can or has been through what you're going through. It's like, martial arts, for example, if you've got a coach who's never fought in their life, you'd be like, well, what are you on about? Like, okay, they might even be a good coach, because for argument's sake, some people don't have to be able to be, have the physical capabilities to do something. Their hand-eye coordination might not be that great, but they understand the concepts and can actually coach. But it definitely helps if you're in a position of showing that you can do that. It's like, money-wise, if you're taking advice off someone who's a millionaire, automatically they have that authority that you're more likely to listen to them than someone who's got £300 in the bank account, even though maybe the guy with £300 might actually have a better set of advice for you, essentially.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, like my position is one that, on race day and in the training when we're all in the boat, like, I'm not actually doing any physical work. So I think it's really important from a leadership perspective for them to see that actually, like, I am understanding what they're doing. And it actually also helps me coach them because I have a greater understanding of, like with the volume training of like the sort of cardiovascular training, like it's actually more it's more boring than it is necessarily like intensive. And it's, to sort of understand that and comprehend how the mind works when you're 45 minutes into a 90-minute session. It's like it's so hard to wrap your head around. And I think from a coxing perspective where you're trying to coach these guys through it, there's little tactics that you pick up, little games that you sort of play. It's like, for anyone that's sort of been on a run and you start to get pretty tired and bored, you sort of trick yourself and think, oh, well, if I can get to like the next lamppost, or if I can like, oh, right, well, I'll just make it to that corner. And it's like you pick up on these little things and it's just as relevant in sort of like international level sport. It's like, if you can just trick the mind to get you on that next step forward, that next little, kilometer extra, like it adds up. It does add up.
100%. I love that because that's called. I think it's called the 2 minute rule, or there might be some other variations of that. I always tell my friends who don't really exercise, they're, let's just say, not in the best of shape, and I say, look, mate, you the reason you're not doing anything is because you're looking at it as such a big thing. I need to go to the gym for 3 hours. I was like, mate, just do 10 press ups, 5 press ups, two press ups. Do something for 2 minutes. You'll end up doing half an hour anyway, because once you're doing it, you're going to end up doing it. And like you say, breaking down the pizza into smaller slices, one slice at a time. I'll just get to that bit. I'll just get to that bit. I'll just get to that bit. It helps you get through the whole process. I don't know if you've seen that film called Touching the Void.
No.
About the two guys who, I'm not going to say the whole thing, but the two guys from Sheffield, basically two mates. They went to South America to climb this unclimbed mountain, and basically they had a rope between them. Something happened, and one had to cut the rope on the other because one broke their leg, basically. Cut the rope. He thought he'd died. He went back to camp. Now, the other guy was halfway up a mountain, broken leg, had to crawl over like 3 days, all the way back to camp, obviously over rocky boulders and stuff like that. And this is what he basically said. He's like, I just said to myself, look, all I have to do is let me just get to that bit. Let me just get to that bit. Let me just get to that bit. Over 3 days, he managed to get, halfway down a pretty tall mountain. No, sorry, he fell through a crevasse. That was it. He fell through a crevasse, and then he had to get out the crevasse and crawl back home. And when he got back to camp, the guy thought that he thought he'd seen a ghost. because obviously he'd cut the rope on the guy to die basically, and he's turned
Yeah.
up, crawled with a broken leg. So it's amazing what the mind can do, and it's good that you said that, because I think that's a lot of your job, isn't it, as the Cox, is to play these mind games with the people who are going through what, as you said, what you've also been through, and trying to understand how to get the best out of them in that situation.
Absolutely. And I think like one of the massive things is you hear a lot of fitness influencers, talking about consistency will always beat the sort of sporadic half effort. And it's so true, and especially over an Olympiad, which is multiple years, just like learning how to trick yourself to just keep turning up every day. Like those are the people that are going to do really well. And it's so true. Like consistency will outperform anything else. Like if you can wire your mind to think in a way of I don't have to be Olympic champion today. I don't have to be like, the world's greatest today. I just have to turn up. And if you have that mindset every single day for multiple years, like no matter what field you're in, I think it's a universal life lesson. Like if you have that mindset, you'll probably get to a really high level of the thing that you've chosen to turn up for. Like it's so valuable.
100%, little and often is definitely, a big thing.
Sorry,
Like the example I always
Javine,
use.
can I just go for a sec? Hang on, I've got
Of
someone
course,
knocking on the door.
of
Just give.
course, of
Sorry,
course.
I hope you can edit this out.
It's all right, don't
Give
worry
me
about
two
it.
seconds. Hang on. Sorry. Um,
So what was the quote that you were on about with regards to consistency?
so like I remember now. The you know if you can if you can instill consistency into your training habits, you'll always beat the person who's waiting to be motivated to do something. And I think that's one thing that a lot of people fall into the trap of. And certainly when I was younger, like I thought, looking up at Usain Bolt and Mo Farah, and I was like, oh my God, these guys are just superhuman. Like how on earth do they do it? And having been so fortunate enough to go through that process, like and being around Olympians and training for an Olympics, like I can promise you, Olympians have days where they really, really cannot be bothered. And they're so knackered that they don't want to turn up to training, and they'll sort of get themselves over the line. They'll turn up to the gym and they'll be starting to like stretch and warm up, and they will literally be like silent, head in hands, can't do it today. And there'll be a moment where they, maybe they just need 5 minutes to themselves. They'll start to get warmed up. Maybe they just, need an espresso or something, and like they'll find a way. They'll find a way to do that day without fail, even if it's not like 100% of the best thing that they could have ever done. They turn up and they do it as well as they possibly can, even if their head's not in it. And I
I,
think that is probably that for me is the main difference between the people who sort of say they want to be amazing and the people who end up actually being amazing.
I think there's a synonymous word with perfectionism and procrastination. You don't always have to be perfect. Like you say, you just turn up. If you haven't done as well today, that's fine. But you have done more today than you would have done if you just said, "Oh, I need everything to be perfect." Nothing in life is perfect. You're not always going to have the perfect day, but you have to be willing to step up and do it when you're not feeling too great. Maybe you had a bad night's sleep. Maybe you've got some other stresses in your life, financial, health wise, whatever.
Yeah.
But you have to sort of put that out of your mind if you want to do something. But coming back to just what we were saying earlier, just on the Usain Bolt thing and Mo Farah, I don't know if you've seen where there's like a running machine going at the speed of like these runners over like a marathon speed, and you put the average Joe on the street on it to try and sprint for as long as they can, and they
Yeah.
can't even do like 8 seconds, and you're like, how the fuck is this guy running 26 miles at a sprinting speed faster than the average man? Mate, it's insane.
that like Kipchoge's marathon pace is actually bonkers. And like when I was coxing and I was doing loads of running, I got to a fairly decent level with my running, and we'd go on altitude camps, so I'd have the benefit of like training altitude with my own running when they were just stuck on the rowing machines. And oh my word, like to be able to do that pace for sub 2 hours is mind blowing to me. But then, I think a lot of people see the guys who on the rowing team and thinking, oh, could you hold a 127 per 500-meter pace for six minutes? People think the rowers are superhuman as well. It's just like whatever these guys dedicate their lives to their craft. It's crazy what can be done. The human body is an amazing thing.
It is, and I think there's a paradox going on at the minute because the elite athletes seem to be getting better. Like the times are getting faster, the conditioning's getting better, the science behind it's getting better, the training methods are getting better, the psychology is getting better, and all of these things. Yet the average man is less fit. So the disparity now between the regular man and an athlete is widening, sort of beyond comparison, isn't it? Really, it's weird.
That's really interesting, and I'm sure. I mean, well, I'm sure there'll be people who are far more qualified to speak on that than me. But like I think there's from the side of times getting faster and all that sort of stuff. Like I think 30, 40 years ago, not everyone had access to heart rate monitors, for example. Whereas I know that's now, that's now something that pretty much everybody has access to. Everyone can do heart rate training. Whereas 40, 50 years ago, that was reserved for elite athletes. As technology progresses and these things trickle down to, your average person, it's going to allow people to do more than humans historically have been able to. Um, but I do think that the ability to train, that the science behind training, is becoming so widespread, and the internet, AI, like all of that sort of stuff, like people can have like a really decent training program for what they need to do, like at their fingertips from the click of a button, which is sort of mind blowing. But yeah, I don't think I can really wrap my head around how people are becoming more and more unfit. Maybe that's something to do with working from home more, like more and more people are working remotely now, and I don't know. I'm not the guy to sort of to speak to about that, but
But
definitely
how
think
would you coach someone who is, let's say, because I think it's a very transferable skill set that you've got. Being the cox in the boat. It's not. I think you said on one of your other podcasts as well. You don't need to have a very extensive knowledge of rowing to be good at being a cox. So if you were to take an average Joe and say, look, what would you say to them to motivate them to actually start moving to do something?
what to motivate if I was trying to coach someone to get to just to get in shape.
Yeah.
I think the main thing would be like to try and you've got to, if you're not naturally geared towards like a desire to train and stuff like that, I think you've almost got to start by tricking yourself into thinking that you're not giving a part of your life away. It's a case of, you know, if there is a part of your day where maybe exercise could be really useful, is there a way that you could manipulate that? So, if you're cycling to work and it takes you 20 minutes, could you could you run that? and get 40 minutes out of that, like it, like an extra 20 minutes out of your day. That's not really that's not a sacrifice. Like people spend that like 5 times that scrolling through Instagram and TikTok. It's like y- I think this is the big thing. I think people sometimes fall into the trap of thinking that getting out and exercising is, oh, it's this big sacrifice and they've got to really commit loads of time to it. And like for most people, like getting out and like just walking for half an hour, like every day, again, it comes back to that consistency. Like if you do that, like that's great. That's so great. And I don't think people realize like how simple it could be to just like get your body moving and no one's expecting you to go out and train like Elliot Kipchoge. No one's expecting that. Like that's mental. He probably runs every hour that God sends. And like, people are busy professionals, they got work on all day. There's actually like a couple of people that spring to mind. One, there's the Imogen Grant who was on the rowing team at Paris, like she's a medic, and I knew of a couple of other people who were racing for other countries who were also medics, and like we all know how incredible our medical staff are and how much time they give pretty much living in hospital to like get their work done. And like still these people manage to find ways to get in their training and fit it in around their day-to-day lives. So, I think trying to overcome that idea that it's this big sacrifice it's not. Even if you can just give 20 minutes every day is better than doing like 1 hour on one day.
Yeah, 100%. And I say the same thing to my friend as well. I'm like, mate, even if you do like 30 press ups a day, at the end of the week you've done over 200 press ups. At the end of
Yeah.
the month you've done like 800. At the end of the year, look how many you've done. And would you not think it will have an impact on your physique and health and all these sorts of things? But some people are difficult, which sort of leads me on to my next question. Is there any, without naming names, I mean, maybe you want to, I don't know, probably not. But are there any athletes that are quite difficult to deal with in terms of, getting on with the rest of the team, the structure of the sessions, listening to your authority, all of these sorts of things? And if so, have you got any sort of little tricks that you've learned yourself over the time to sort of manage individuals differently, if that makes sense?
Oh, definitely. Like definitely I've butted heads with people. Um, and I think more definitely when there's a big volume block of training, when people are more tired, they're obviously a little bit more irritable. And that's when, uh, folks can be a little bit more careless with what they're saying and it's, and people can maybe take things slightly more personally. One thing that I found really, really helped is and this isn't just me. This was actually like this gives you a bit of a context into the types of characters that were in the boat with me when we were training for Paris. Um, we we started to trust each other so much that we could very, very genuinely say what we thought was going on without it being taken personally. And that for me was the pinnacle of a performance mindset. And I don't think I've ever really experienced anything before or since that has really been like that. Like it sounds like something that's so small, but to actually be part of a team where you can communicate so openly and frankly and know that your communication will be taken as though it's the boat speed, it's the common goal that is your reasoning behind this. It's not a personal attack. Everyone wants everyone in that room to do well. And that was like so important. But going back to the question of, when people sort of maybe disagree on things, we would have quite often we'd have training sessions where we would say, right, okay, so we're gonna do it your way today. And everyone in our boat, the eight rowers, the nine of, with me involved as well, um, we're gonna do it your way today. And everyone is gonna give 100% to backing up what you're thinking and maybe, how you're feeling at one end of the boat. We're going to try that for this session and everyone is going to commit to it. And we would, and it would be genuine. And we'd come off the water, we'd have a bit of a discussion. And you know what? Sometimes, doing that, it would be like, yeah, okay, that was actually really rubbish. And everyone comes away and is like, yeah, no, that's really that okay. I was wrong. Let's just forget that. Let's move on to the next thing. Sometimes it'd be like, hey, right, wasn't quite what I thought it'd be. However, there was this one bit that's something that we can actually like hold on to. Like it was really cool to play that exercise because that something was like definitely what we need in our arsenal. And so the ability to just like wholeheartedly give yourselves to each other. Like, I mean, it was the epitome, in my mind, it was the epitome of what being a team really is. So yeah, absolutely, we disagreed. Absolutely, we thought different things, but we had the maturity and the trust to actually like try different perspectives and be open-minded. And it was so powerful, so powerful.
There's a lot that I love about that. One is, and I know this word gets thrown around a lot. It's probably got some negative connotations, I suppose, but authenticity. You can be purely authentic with each other and honest about everything that you're going through, your ideas, because as you say, you're aiming towards a common goal. It's not like you're trying to snake someone because I want this girl and you want this girl also, so I'm going to try and, snake you to get there, which is ridiculous. But the other thing I like is that you didn't just argue saying this is a stupid idea because of X, Y, and Z. This is a great idea because of ABC. You just said, look, do you know what? We'll just play it out and let the results do the talking. Let's
Yeah.
see if it's a good idea or let's see if it's not a good idea. And I think that's actually a real strong leadership skill to say, do you know what? Okay, let's try it. Let's take on the opinions of the people in the boat. Let's try this new idea. If it works, great. If not, also great. And is there maybe one little gem that we can find, as you say, and take that on board to improve moving forward? So I think that's actually quite a sensible and mature way of looking at maybe not arguments per se, but differences of opinion, let's call it, within the team.
Yeah, and we will have all come from very different backgrounds and learn in slightly different ways. So I think a lot of the time certainly when pressure is quite high, like when we're sort of like a month out from a big regatta and stuff like that, it's to be expected. Like insecurity can start to play on your emotions and your thoughts, and you're naturally going to try and like hold on to something that you think and you think is a really solid thing to like ground yourself and hold value to. And I think it's really important that we had this dynamic within our team that was, allowed us to be really frank and open with each other. And it was, like I think before I was part of that team, I thought a lot of that stuff was quite like airy fairy, and I thought it was like a real sort of it was something that like keynote speakers spoke about, and it was just a nice sort of thing to pin up on the wall and to get a team together. But like having come from that, I can wholeheartedly believe in the fact that like if you have a team behind you and with you that like are so open, wearing their heart on their sleeve, and yeah, like we've spoken about that idea of a common goal where nobody wants anyone to fall out of this because we all just want the same thing. It is actually incredible, and I think coming like I stopped coxing after the Paris 2024 Olympics, and I can certainly say that, going out into the real world, like it's a struggle to find that. And I think that's the benefit of like sport. I think sport gives you the opportunity to meet people who are really trying to do the same thing as you and really trying to train their mind, train their body, train their soul into becoming, a better ideal of themselves compared to some people who maybe want to just check in and check out.
Yeah,
Uh, and
100%.
and that's where sport is amazing because sport is so measurable. It's so consistent. With when once you get to a certain level, and that's the beauty of it. Really, it's simple.
Yeah, 100%. I went to a funeral. I don't know, maybe 10 years ago now. It was a friend I used to have like at primary school, really young, and I hadn't seen him for years. And he was one of those top lads. He was really good at all sports. Cricket, football. He was good looking. He was a model. He had everything going for him. Everyone liked him. He was one of these kind of guys. And unfortunately, he died from a heart attack at like 26,
That
28,
sucks to
something like,
say.
yeah, like late 20s. Now, coming back to your point, at the funeral, honestly, the people in his cricket team were in more and I don't mean this disrespectfully. From my perspective, were in more bits than his family were in some ways. Apart from his mum, like your mum's, what I mean, your mum, but they were in bits because, like you say, the sport, they've gone through stuff together. They've been on tour together, had drinks together. They've backed each other up in bad situation. They've gone through wins together, losses together. That bond that they've got was like, you could see it just in the pure sort of emotion that happened or was clear on their face. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah, is I think going through that journey of wins and losses and training every single day. I think, God, yeah, like over those like years that I was in the British team, I would have seen more of the guys over the course of 3 years than I actually would have seen my own wife, which is mental. To sort of anyone who doesn't really know how that kind of stuff works, it's like how does that work? I mean, I'd be on training camps where for like 2, 3 weeks, and then you'd come back and just carry straight on into training, like being there every single day, and it's just like these guys know you inside out after going through that kind of a routine. It's impossible not to know the guys around you. But that's cool. It was amazing.
Yeah, I mean, there's two sides of it, isn't there? There's one is the sort of, as we've talked about thus far, really, the performance side, making sure we're doing the right things, the teamwork, the common goal stuff. But there's also the funny stuff, you know, people forgetting stuff, being, missing the train or getting up late or, getting too drunk or whatever. Are there any funny stories that you can share without, incriminating anyone about stuff on the team?
Uh, I'm not too bothered about incriminating to people. There, yeah, there was definitely one guy who was late to everything. That was Charlie, who sat in the five seat of R8. He was late to everything. We had there was a guy called Tom who he had this sort of like little uh tick of like he'd like hum all the time, and he'd kind of do it when he was in a good mood. So in a way, it was like sometimes it'd be like really annoying, but then also like in like high pressure situations, it'd actually kind of reassure you that he was like he was fine and he was quite calm. So it'd be like, oh right, okay, Tom's like humming away, so he's pretty chill, so I can relax a little bit as well. Um, and then God, there was Rory Gibbs, who was more towards the front of the boat. He'd get so anxious. So he raced at the Tokyo Olympics in a four, and it really didn't quite go to plan for him. And I think he had a lot of demons going into the Olympics, so he like he'd get really really worked up and really nervous, and I knew him for about 10 years before going into the Olympics. So we knew each other so well. Um, and that was what he was one of the guys that I was like, when we crossed the line and we got gold, I was just thinking, wow, I'm I'm so happy for him that he's managed to turn that around. Like I remember that being one of the thoughts that I had before we picked up our medals, and I think that was, I felt that way for a lot of the guys. It was just, there was quite a few of the boat who had raced in Tokyo and not done as well as they'd liked. Like Tokyo for British rowing was really not very good. I think like British rowing has quite a it's held in high esteem when the Olympics comes around, and like it's quite often like a surefire thing that will get some medals in the rowing. Um, and so to actually like get into the team and be with some of those guys that had to handle that failure, like I learned so much from them. It was learning from their disappointment almost fed into me of like I had to step up to the mark because there's no way I can let these guys go through that again. And their experience was something that like motivated me. But yeah, like every guy in that boat had some quirk to them, and that's what made it so much fun. It was it was so much fun to be able to train with them and work with them. I actually saw a thing. I think it was to do with Rory McIlroy for the golf recently, where he was talking about he thought that the he'd sort of like win the Masters, and that would be he'd have this feeling of total elation, and it'd be like this euphoric feeling, and actually that never came. He realized that that wasn't the end. And I remember feeling something massively similar. I remember being picked for the Olympics and thinking, oh my word, like if I can come away from this Olympics and feel and win a medal, like my life, but the rest of my life is going to be plain sailing, job done. Like I can just sit back and relax in total bliss and happiness. And as soon as it was all done, it really, really hit me hard that actually it was the guys, it was the journey, it was the times like taking the piss out of each other and having a laugh and turning up every day, and sometimes we'd be knackered, sometimes it'd be really hilarious, sometimes we'd fall out. It was just that was it. That was my Olympic gold medal. It was just being with those guys for 3 years. That
Well,
was it.
it's from what you said, you can see that. You talked about the quirks, which it's the quirks that make people lovable. The quirks that only being close to them. In Japan they talk about this, don't they? With the the pottery that gets broken, instead of trying to fix it, they exaggerate the issues with them because that's what makes them personal. Because there's no other vase like that one, and
Mm.
that's very much the same with humans. And yeah, you get that a lot with athletes as well, don't you? Where they think that this thing is going to be the defining moment, and actually they're like, well, what's next? Or it wasn't as big as I thought it was, etc. And one of the things that you said, which is important, especially as a leader, and just shows how close knit that team was, is that you were more worried about the other guys getting the medals and being happy for them as much
Yeah,
as it
I
was
was.
for
I
yourself.
genuinely was. Yeah, it was kind of terrifying. I remember just thinking like, you know, it would really suck if it was my fault that these guys didn't get the medal they deserved. That was my thought going into it. And that was kind of terrifying because I felt like I had, you know, like being able to wear the Team GB kit and, have the nation behind us, like that was all cool, and but like your mind can't really comprehend like an entire nation sort of expecting you to do something. Like you can only really work around the village and the environment that you're sort of in. And I was just thinking like I can't spoil it for these guys in front of me, and that's all that mattered. That was it.
It's
Yeah.
accountability. I love it. That's a sign of a good leader in my book.
I like to think I did all right. I think it was the greatest honor of my life to be able to do that and to be able to live with these guys and train with them, and
Don't tell your wife that.
Yeah, better keep that one quiet. Don't publish that. Let's see if we can edit that out. Um, no, no,
I know what you mean, though.
my wife knows that I love her very, very much. But I think even she would agree that, like it was a real privilege to be able to do that. It was seriously cool, and I think it was the culmination of my entire life's work to that date. And to be able to get a gold medal is I'm incredibly proud of it. I'm incredibly proud of it. But it was hard. It was hard for
It's
sure.
the upper echelon, doesn't it? For every gold medal, look how many people got a lower medal or didn't get a medal or never made it or whatever. So it's like the pinnacle of the pinnacle, isn't it? To get to the Olympics alone is difficult. Never mind win it or become world champion or whatever else. So, is there anything that we've not covered that you think could be worth mentioning?
Um, I think that there's something to be said about like the pressure of like the 2 weeks when you're in the Olympics. I think from the perspective from the public, and when you watch on TV, and like I grew up watching the Olympics on telly, and it was amazing. And it looks so exciting. You got the fireworks, you got the opening ceremony, you hear all the stories of the stuff that's going on in the Olympic Village, and it all sounds like like this big festival of sport. And I can safely say that. So we were in the first week. Our racing was in the first week of that 2 weeks of the Paris Olympics, and I can safely say it was probably the worst week of my life. Genuinely, like I knew that I wasn't going to do another Olympics because I was 30 at the time, and I wanted to move on and pick up other work and not have to be away from my wife and family for, a month, 2 months on end doing bits and bobs. I wanted to have a bit more of a grounded lifestyle. So I was sat there in Paris thinking like, this is my one chance to do this. And every day was terrifying because it was almost like it was this massive countdown clock. And it's not as though I thought my life was going to end once it was all done, but I had this constant internal battle of like, am I going to be able to live with myself if I don't get a medal, or if I get a medal and it's not the one that we really should have got? Um, and that was really hard. It was really hard to wrap my head around. And I think, being part of Team GB in any capacity, like any sport, Team GB do so well, and they punch above their weight massively considering the size of our nation, and especially in a sport like rowing with a really storied history in picking up gold medals and stuff like that. It was horrible. It was really, really horrible. And I remember there being loads of press articles about the United States lead like after the heats. So that after the heats, the USA posted a quicker time than us in the heat. Like we won our heat, the USA won the other heat, and for about 3 days. I mean, I really tried not to, but my sort of anxiety got the better of me, and I was just looking up what was going on in the papers about our racing, and all of the chat was about the USA. And it was really, really grating down on me. And there was this moment where I think I was on the phone to one of my parents, and even though I would have had this advice from my coach and from my teammates, like I can't remember who said it from my family, but they were just like, it doesn't matter. Like that newspaper's going in the bin tomorrow and no one's going to read it again. Like it really doesn't matter. And you know like you've already done all of this amazing stuff, so you just need to go and do what you've always done. And we love you anyway, and we never would have thought you'd even get to this point. And it kind of just put it into perspective that like there's so much pressure on these athletes to succeed that sometimes I said it earlier, it's the journey that matters. And it kind of something clicked in me where I didn't look at my phone again. I didn't try and read what the papers were doing. And I just had this much more maverick attitude of like, do you know what? It's going to be what it's going to be. But someone's going to have to take it out of my cold dead hands if we're going to get a medal, if we're going to get a gold. And it totally flipped my mindset. And that was massively important in a week that I actually really didn't enjoy. The racing I really enjoyed, but like the everything outside of the racing was really, really mentally difficult. So I think, when you see footballers and like high profile sports stars and they're, getting absolutely berated through the media, these guys deal with a lot. And I only dealt with a little bit of it because not many people know much about rowing. But I do sympathize with those people.
Sometimes you've got to go through those sort of bad points, in your mind to then realise what the good way of thinking is. A lot of people do go through it. It's the whole, was it the Streisand effect, where they took a photo of her house and she basically reported it and no one cared about it, but then they realised it's her house and it got much more traction than it would have done if she kept her mouth shut. It's kind of like that. Sometimes you think more people are worried about it, that see it, that care, than actually do. It's weird. Our mind is a very weird thing. And like you said at the very start or earlier on in the conversation, sometimes we have to trick our mind to get the best out of it. And I think that's what you've mastered by the sound of it.
Yeah, it took a lot to do it, and I think it's so doable. You can really trick your mind into doing some pretty amazing stuff.
Well, thanks very much for being on the show, Harry. As I said, that video's helped me out. So, yeah, awesome.
Not at all. My Olympic one is up there somewhere. So yeah, there's clips of the Olympic footage and what I was saying in that as well.
I'll have to,
But
I'll have to have a butcher's.
yeah, give it a look, and yeah, very very special times, and it's been awesome to relive it with you. So thank you.
No worries, love it.